Welcome to another DragonLance Saga Dungeon Mastering 101 episode. It is Majitog Floor Green the 26th. My name is Adam, and today we're going to talk about the invisible strings that pull your campaign world together. That's right. Now, a lot of new DMs make the mistake of thinking their campaign needs to be driven solely by a single main villain. But villains come and go. What keeps a world alive, reactive, and unpredictable are its factions. When you have organizations, cults, or orders working in the background, your players aren't just fighting monsters. They're navigating a living society. Now, today we're going to learn how to design factions that your players will actually care about. Of course, I would like to take a moment, thank the DL Saga YouTube members and Patreon patrons, and invite you to consider becoming a patron or member. You can even grab DragonLance Media or get $10 signing up to StartPlaying.Games. Quick note about StartPlaying.Games. This Thursday, I'm starting the DL2 Dragons of Flame. I've got all of the Heroes of Lance covered, except for Tasselhoff Burfoot. So, if any of you want to check out Tasselhoff Burfoot, shoot me an email at info@dlsaga.com. Or you can always just go on to startplaying.games and search Adam PC or Dragons of Flame or DL2 or something like that. And I should pop up there. All right. Also, before we dive into the show, Dragons of Ash and Twilight. So that is the anthology that a bunch of fans and myself put together. It's a high fantasy anthology. It's completely free and it is available right now in PDF, ebook, and audiobook formats. So if you love high fantasy stories and you want to get a free collection of them, there's some really good ones in there. Go over to my website. The link is in the description below and you can pick it up. And all we ask in return is that you consider giving us a review of it. We'd love to hear what you guys think of it. So yeah, it's all on the website, and even the review link is there with the download links on the same page. So it's making it super easy for everyone. All right. That being said, let's dive into today's Dungeon Mastering 101 discussion. And we're going to start with the faction as an NPC extra large. All right, so the easiest way to design a faction without getting overwhelmed by lore is to use a variation on the instant NPC formula. Now, we've already discussed this in past episodes. A faction doesn't need a multi-page constitution. It needs three things. That's it. The ideology, the want. What is the ultimate goal? And what are they trying to do to get it? 2, the public face or the mood of the faction. How do they present themselves to the average citizen? Are they seen as protectors, tyrants, or eccentric scholars? And 3, the monopoly, the leverage. What resource or authority or knowledge do they control that everyone else needs? Now, in the lens of Dragonlance, especially since I'm going to be running DL2 Dragons of Flame here this week, let's talk a little bit about the Dragon Army, the Red Dragon Army, as commanded at this moment by Verminard, as it's sweeping across Anslon. They have their base in Pax Starkaz. So let's look at these three items and see what that faction, the Red Dragon Army, how it lives up to this idea, right? So the ideology, the want. What does the Red Dragon Army want? Well, they want total dominion over all of Anslon. The Red Dragon Army is taking over Abanasinia, Quillinisty, and all of southeastern Anslon. Of course, they're then going to be moving on over to like southern Ergoth and stuff. But for right now, they're just clenching their fist around southern Anslon. So the public face, the mood. How does the Red Dragon Army present itself? As insurmountable. It hits you with shock and awe, with dragons, with draconians, massive amounts of troops. And the thing is that's only when they are ready to reveal themselves. Up until that point, they work through existing factions. That's the brilliance of the Red Dragon Army. They could just fly over the sky with their, red dragon wing and just bombard everyone with dragon fear, go down and slowly pick people off one by one. But instead, they're actually leveraging the Seeker movement. Now, the Seeker movement is already in control of the entire area. It's a faction of its own. It started as a religious movement, turned into a socio-political faction that's based out of Haven, and it's in total control of the entire area, especially now with the backing of the Red Dragon Army in this Abanasinia region. So it makes perfect logical sense for the Red Dragon Army to use existing factions in order to leverage its own wants and desires. And so let's talk about the leverage, the monopoly. What is the resource, the authority, or the knowledge that the Red Dragon Army controls that everyone else needs? Well, I don't know about needs, but the leverage that it has, the control that it has, is the backing of the Dark Queen herself. They have the only access to the gods, to healing magic. According to everyone else on the planet at this point, it's only the Red Dragon Army that has healing ability and divine spell casting, specifically through Verminard in this region, but also Erica's has it, the Emperor himself. He's also sort of blessed by Takesis. And it's important because there's been 350 years of no gods healing. And so people have suffered famine, they've suffered diseases, they've suffered maladies that could have been resolved earlier, and had been resolved in earlier epics, simply by the use of prayer and reaching out to the divine. And in the absence of that, in the sheer vacuum of that, steps this Red Dragon Army. And they demand fealty, they demand loyalty, but if you do, yeah, you're going to be subjugated, you're going to live in an oppressive regime, but you might not suffer as much as if when you actually stand against them. So then let's consider the faction of the Seekers, right? I already talked about them. What do they want? Ultimately, they want gods. They want there to be a pantheon of deities that cares about mortals, that wants them around, that doesn't abandon them because of one man's decision or one empire's choices. What's the public face of them? Well, it's caring. We're here to help. We're here to protect the people. And the leverage they have, the monopoly, they created their own pantheon of gods. They created an entire network of religious institution that reaches out to Gateway and Solace, headquartered in Haven, and then spreads out from there. And they are the protector of the local people from the Red Dragon Army. As long as you do what the Seekers say, then everything's going to be okay. The Red Dragon Army assured us that everything's going to be okay, right? Now, Krynn is filled with amazing factions, and all of them have these same exact three desires. They have a want, they have a mood, and they have some form of leverage, whether you're talking about the Knights of Solamnia, the Orders of High Sorcery, Thieves Guilds, anything, old empires, whether it's Ergoth, some Kurish nomads or warlords, all Colonistry and Sylvanistry, Thorbarden. I mean, everywhere has these individual factions with their own motivations, their own wants and needs, and their own leverage over others who want what they have, to encourage people to engage and interact with them. That puts them in a position of authority and power. That's what you need when you're putting together your factions. You don't need a full breakdown of the hierarchy of the faction. You don't need a personality for every single person. You just need three basic ideas. So I hope that helps a little bit. Hey, Chris, how you doing? Pumped for DL2. Yeah, it's going to be fun. Verminard conquered more areas than Erica's and would have taken Thorbarden next if Paladine didn't interfere. Yeah. Vote for him in the next election. All right, so the next part about building up factions is the golden rule, right? Factions must be dynamic. Now, a boring faction is static. It just sits in a castle waiting for players to visit. A great faction is active. They're constantly pushing their own agendas in the background. For example, in my Tyranny of Dragons campaign, I've got a cult of Morgian that is spreading all up Coastland. It ended up intersecting with the heroes in a number of different places initially when they were leaving from Salanthus to head over the mountain range to get to Coastland. But then also, once they got to Coastland, they ran into it there, and that's where things got really, really personal, and the cult started sort of reaching out and finding them and trying to pull them in. So this is an ongoing threat that is active outside of the player characters and even the story that the module is telling. It's just that this is a living world, and so you're going to run into other factions. They happened to run into this one. That's what you want. That's the best case scenario. Look, the Seeker religion, whether you engage with them or not, is an active participant in Abanasinia during this and previous eras. So to pretend that they're not there or never to include them, even by brief mention, does a bit of a disservice because they are in a position of power and authority. They're definitely there that you could leverage them to help a population or to discover that they don't care about really helping. They just want power. It's a living faction that is active in the world, and it should be managed on some level and interacted with on some level with player characters if they're in Abanasinia in this time frame. So, while the players are away in a dungeon, factions are expanding their territory, making alliances, or suffering internal civil wars. This is how you fuel your exploration and social pillars. Now, we've already talked about that before. When players return to a city, the faction dynamics should have shifted based on the passage of time. So, another great example that I'm doing with the Tyranny of Dragons campaign. The whole Cult of the Dragon is actually a front for the secret society within the Knights of Naraka, right? But this secret society, the Cabal of the Code, isn't aligned with all the other factions of the Dark Knights because the Dark Knights as an organization have been splintering and fracturing. There was an old noble lord that was a part of the Dark Knights in Abanasinia that has split off from them and just decided to plant his flag and sort of rule over this area in Abanasinia instead of, swearing fealty to the current Lord Knight. That's something that you always have to keep in mind. Factions are going to have inner problems. They're going to have schisms from time to time. They're going to be exercising their will on the greater world at large, but what's happening inside? Now, in the 5th Age of Krynn, especially in the latest post-War of Souls era, I haven't read these books yet, but I do know that the Knights of Solamnia have been fracturing as well, with the Emperor of Solamnia sort of deviating, at least in vision, with the Knights of Solamnia. And so it is an interesting idea that even they would then fracture. Of course, we saw a wonderful fracture with them in the War of the Lance between Lord Gunther Uthwistan and Derek Crownguard, and Sturm Brightblade was just smack dab in the middle of it all. So no matter what the faction is, it's got its own things going on regardless of the players. Always remember that if you're keeping track of time, like you should be as a good DM, especially in Krynn, because the moons, whatever the players are doing, if they come back a week, a month, or a year later to a region, chances are power dynamics have shifted. The factions themselves may have shifted. And by applying just a little bit of that acknowledgement, you are immersing what you're doing is creating an immersive world for the players to then get immersed within, to get lost within. And that's the ultimate goal, right? We're world building here. You're not spending tons of time. You're not plotting out story beats for the factions. You just say, okay, at this point, this is where the faction is, and in a month's time, it's going to be here. It takes you just a few moments to brainstorm the idea. And so when the players come back, they're no longer where they started. They're now right here. And thus, the world feels like it shifted when really it was just a quick little mental note on your part that made it feel like it was much more dramatic than it actually was. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about here is the three-way friction model. Now, to make your world feel politically alive, never introduce a faction in isolation. Always design them in groups of 3 to create immediate narrative tension. So, the establishment, the group currently holding power. Let's say, for example, the Knights of Solamnia. The disruptor, the group trying to tear that power down or to change it. Well, that could be the dragon armies. And the wild card, the group caught in the middle or working on an entirely different plane of logic. We could have that be the Wizards of High Sorcery. They have members trying to help out the Whitestone Council, and they also have members helping out the dragon armies. They're sort of split within themselves, but they're always joining in their own faction for the love and devotion to magic. So you have this triumvirate, as it will, of factions that are always going to be ebbing and flowing and jockeying for position. And again, you don't have to do a lot of homework for it. I mean, in Dragonlance, it's already built for you. But if you're building your own world, it's really simple. Have two factions as opposing views and have one that straddles the fence. Then all the hard work is done already, right? Makes it really, really easy. You always love the old Dragonlance adventure versions of the Knights of the Crown, Sword and Rose. Modern versions of Dragonlance has made those differences negligible or obsolete. Yeah, I agree. I think modern... I mean, again, it just sort of depends on how the Dungeon Master runs it. But if you just take it by what Wizards of the Coast released in 2014, 5th edition, then yeah, it's pretty negligible. But again, if you're a fan of Dragonlance and you're running it, don't just take what's given to you. You know, always do exactly what Dragonlance did originally. Go back to the original source material and use that for inspiration moving forward. Don't just take what someone hands you, because chances are it's not going to live up to your expectation of Dragonlance, and it's certainly not going to live up to your expectations of the orders or factions within it. So always do a little bit of homebrew, I think. At least that's what I suggest. All right, so why does this rule of three-way friction model work? It prevents black and white storytelling. Now look, Dragonlance can be blamed for being ones and zeros, black and white, good and evil. But it's really not. It's about it maintaining balance. So that's why you see sometimes the neutral gods are siding with the evil gods, or sometimes the neutral gods are siding with the good gods. You always have good and evil in opposition, but the neutrality, that third leg, is constantly shifting in motion and influence. And that's an important part of what makes Dragonlance much more than a simplistic fairy tale. It makes it a dynamic storytelling engine for you to leverage for your players. Okay, so use that three-way friction model for a really quick and simple way to get your factions and your world breathing a little bit of life. The next thing I want to talk about here is making factions felt at the table. So don't just talk about the factions. Show their footprints in the world. Use your environmental clues. Remember, some players die for this type of information. Some players couldn't care at all, but if you got players on your table who want to be immersed in the world, this is the easiest thing you can do to feed them and keep them happy and coming back. Taxation and law is a great one. Do guards wear the faction's livery at the gates? Is there seal on the coin? If you plant a mayor's face or a high seeker's face on some coin, on a steel coin, well, now suddenly that has power. That speaks to authority that no one else in that local government has. Is it overreaching? Is it something that's accepted by other people? Are there multiple versions of mints out there with different faces on them, rivaling for positions of monetary power? It doesn't take a lot of thought, but it is something that is going to add a little bit of immersion and life. Whispers in the street, overheard rumors about factional movements. People are talking under the, have you heard about the high theocrat Hedrick? Oh my gosh, the dude's an asshole. You know, I mean, you don't have to explain why. It's just something people hear as you're passing by. But what it does is it sets up an expectation that Hedrick has some sort of influence or a position of authority in Solace, which he kind of does a little bit, especially in DL1. Not so much in DL2 anymore. So then, of course, you have signs of conflict. A graffiti scrawled symbol of a rebel faction over a government poster. Solace burned to the ground. The end of the last home ripped from the canopy of the Valenwood trees and landed onto the ground. Have signs that there has been conflict. The players don't have to be involved in it. Just that it existed and it happened. Instantly, you're giving them immersion and you're telling them factions exist. There was the faction that was before, and there's the faction that has come and taken over the Red Dragon Army instead of the High Seekers. So the next part about this, about sort of defining factions, is the case study here, the balance of Krynn. I think this is a really simple way. I've been doing it all along, but let's just take a little bit of a closer look. Dragonlance, I think, is a masterclass in faction design, simply because the factions are the history of the world. So the Knights of Slamnia aren't just good guys. They're an establishment bound by a rigid code, the measure, that can sometimes blind them to shifting realities in the world. It creates a very interesting, engaging idea of a faction that can be frustrating for players or can actually assist in engaging players, drawing players in to engage with the world simply because of the choices that faction have made. And of course, the Knights of Slamnia in the wake of the Cataclysm were ostracized and run out of their own homelands. So, some of them turned into robber barons, some of them ran for their lives. But it just creates this idea of a once mighty faction that has fallen from grace and is slowly coming back, putting its mark on the world, doing its best to defend people, even those who are in stark opposition to them. Of course, you got the Wizards of High Sorcery. They cross political boundaries entirely. They prioritize the balance of magic over the laws of mortal kings. They do whatever they want as long as it's in service to the order and to the magic, because that's all that matters to them. Now, that may be that they're focusing on themselves, or they're focusing on siding with one of the other political factions in the greater world at large, but you can't deny it's a very potent and powerful faction within Dragonlance. I mean, you can even make the argument that the gnomes of Mount Nevermind are a faction, because whomever gets to them and leverages their technology can create implements of maybe not, well, what's the word I'm looking for? Expected, refined. I can't think of the word. It's going to come to me. But anyway, devices that don't always work, but when they do work, they can be devastating. And even when they don't work, they can be devastating militarily, used in a conflict. So, and we've seen it over and over and over again in all the Dragonlance novels. So it's not a stretch to imagine that even while the Whitestone Council has endeared themselves to the Mount Nevermind gnomes, simply because of course, proximity and history, there's no reason why maybe a secret member of the dragon army is trying to lure some gnomes with a particular life quest to their side, or lie to them outright to take their technology from them or to get them to help them. So they become a faction in and of themselves, maybe through naivete, maybe through desire to see their life quest fulfilled, and they're running out of resources to see it done, and someone else offers them those resources. Like, there's a lot of ways you can play it, but Dragonlance is filled with factions like this. When you run these factions, highlight their internal flaws and friction, and again, you don't have to go overboard. You just have to throw out a couple one-liners. That is where the adventure hides for players. They find wonder and magic in this world that otherwise just seemed very stale in ones and zeros and good and bad. Reading part of the Chronicles with your son, where the companions are in Thorbarden and Hedrick, is still part of leadership. Your son was confused why. You told him that people often retain poor leaders for comfort. That's definitely true. And in some cases, it's not even because the population has a choice, Someone may come in as an elected leader or representative, and then they just decide they want to stay. That's how dictators come into power. They just change the laws so that they can stay, and there's nothing the population can do unless they have a straight up civil war or rebel against them. And we've seen that in our histories a lot as well, globally. So a dark gnome faction working for the dragon armies. So that is something that I did not make up. Wizards of the Coast actually has that in their Shadow of the Dragon Queen campaign. So that's just something that they did. But it is something that seems logical to me. Like, why wouldn't, they have wooed some people over? I mean, America literally took Nazi scientists for our space program. So, yeah. factions are only effective when you're leveraging them, and they're only worthwhile when they're still alive and running. Otherwise, you got to switch factions and you got to go to where your passions lie. So the next thing I wanted to talk about here is the yes, but of faction alliances. So when players decide to ally with a faction, use your yes, but mindset. Now, we've talked about yes, but before. Not a yes, but yes, but. So yes, the local thieves guild will help you smuggle the artifact out of the city, but you now owe them a favor that will complicate your relationship with the town guard. For example, in my Tyranny of Dragons campaign, a druid left their deity. Morgan was trying to woo them and gave them an opportunity to get back at some people. They accepted that opportunity, and then the consequences started landing. They want your soul. They want to corrupt the rest of your party. They want to destroy everything that you once stood for, all because you accepted one thing. So yes, you can get power from them, but it's going to cost you down the road. And we're still dealing with the fallout of that in that game. Let me try to think of DL2. What would be a good example of this? You want to help save Solace, but in order to do so, in stand-up, you want to... Here's a good one. Gilthanas is in the last home at the beginning of DL2 Dragons of Flame. He's part of the resistance movement. He comes to talk to you because you have Tanis Half-Elven in your party, and of course he was raised with him. They're surrogate brothers of sorts. So if Tanis Half-Elven is there, is he going to then help Gilthanas once Draconians start roughing him up? Well, yes, you can go help him, but there's going to be consequences. Now you're going to have to probably be roped into being a slave and thrown in the slave caravan. Can you help the elves distract the dragon army so the elves can pop smoke over to Southern Aragoth with their Sylvanisty brothers? Yes, but you're going to have to crawl through Slaamori, face some giant slugs, and, but Lorana is going to be taken in the process, and you're going to have to go find her and bring her back as well. So use yes, but to add tension and dimension to the world and to the player's desires, leveraging faction with it. So faction alignment should always carry some form of a narrative cost. We want you to help us, but it's going to put you in an incredibly precarious position if you do it, and you might not make it out alive. Always think of the consequences of actions and how leveraging a faction can add consequences to players. So the DM101 mindset of all of this. You are the facilitator as the Dungeon Master. You are not the politician. Your job isn't to decide which faction is right or wrong. You don't need to present justification to players. Your job is to present motivations honestly and let the players decide who to support, who to betray, and who to fight. If they decide that they want to side with the Seekers or the Dragon Army, that's fine. There are consequences. Yes, you can fight with the Dragon Army, but your alignment's going to shift, and that's going to probably affect some of your powers depending on the class. And so you go through the alignment tracking chart that Dragonlance provided you with in DLA Dragonlance Adventures, and there's consequences for shifting alignments. Of course, even without that, there's consequences that should be adhered to. But Dragonlance just makes it easy for you to track it. So let the players' choices ripple through the power structure. Let them find their own place. Don't tell them how to play or what to do. Let them make choices on their own. You provide the consequences of those choices based on the factions that they end up aligning themselves with. Now, even if you align yourself with good factions, it doesn't mean they're going to come out unscathed. There are always consequences. Now, you are going to be seen as, if you help the Knights of Solamnia, for example, you're a sympathizer. And now all of the biases that people had against the Knights of Solamnia are being thrown onto you. You're just as bad as them. You caused the cataclysm just like them. It's guilt by association. And factions should definitely carry that, just like anything else. So my closing takeaway to this entire conversation: designing factions isn't about creating complex political spreadsheets. It's about creating friction. When you give an organization a clear goal, a public persona, and distinct leverage, they stop being background lore and become an active engine of your story. Give your world forces that push back against the players, and your players are going to dive right in. So anyway, that's what I think. Love to hear what you guys have to say about building factions and whether or not you even care about factions in your games. Do your players respond to them when you bring them out? Let me know in the comments. That is going to do it for this episode of Dungeon Mastering 101. I would like to take a moment and invite you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. It goes to help other DragonLance fans learn about this channel and its content. Thank you to creator patrons Aaron Hardy and D. Robert Handy, producer patron David Galindo, developer patrons Chris Androu and Sam Ruiz, and all of the YouTube members. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of DragonLance Saga. I hope you join in that celebration. Thank you for joining. Thank you for watching. This has been Adam with DragonLance Saga, and until next time, Slanjavar.